Everyone is raising chickens. From small backyard setups to large commercial farms, chickens have become the default choice for anyone entering profitable farming. It feels safe, it feels familiar, and for most beginners, it feels like the obvious starting point. But what if that obvious choice is exactly what's holding you back? What if the bird you've been told to raise is actually the reason most small farm income never grows? Because behind the scenes, there's a different bird, one that eats less, survives better, demands less attention, and quietly generates more profit with fewer headaches. A bird that fits perfectly into small-scale farming systems, backyard farming setups, and even micro-farming environments. And yet, most people ignore it. Not because it doesn't work, but because they simply don't know. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why that might be the biggest opportunity in homesteading for profit right now. Because once you see the numbers, once you understand the behavior, once you compare the real farm ROI, you might never look at chickens the same way again. But before we reveal that bird, we need to talk about the reality most beginners face when they start with chickens. Because this is where everything begins to fall apart. At first, it looks simple. You buy a few chicks. You set up a small space. You imagine fresh eggs, steady income, and a smooth farming side hustle that grows over time. But very quickly, the hidden costs begin to show up. Feed. Feed becomes your biggest expense almost immediately. Chickens depend heavily on constant feeding. And as feed prices rise, especially in many parts of the world, your profit margin starts shrinking before you even notice it. What was supposed to be a profitable small farm starts turning into a constant cycle of spending. And then come the diseases. Chickens are vulnerable. They require close monitoring, vaccinations, and proper hygiene control. One mistake, one outbreak, and you could lose a large portion of your flock in days. For many beginners, this is where the dream starts to crack. Because livestock profit isn't just about raising animals. It's about keeping them alive long enough to generate returns. And with chickens, that becomes a challenge. Then there's the time commitment. Chickens need regular feeding, cleaning, supervision, and protection. If you're running a farm startup as a side hustle, this becomes overwhelming fast. What seemed like a flexible homestead business begins to feel like a full-time job. And even after all that effort, the returns can still disappoint. Egg prices fluctuate. Meat prices vary. And when you calculate your farm ROI, honestly, the numbers don't always justify the stress. This is why so many people quit farming for beginners within the first year. Not because farming doesn't work, but because they chose the wrong system. And that's where things start to shift. Because there's a bird that flips this entire equation. A bird that reduces your biggest cost, increases your survival rate, and simplifies your entire operation. A bird that aligns perfectly with the idea of profitable livestock for small farms. Guinea fowl. Now, if you've never considered guinea fowl before, you're not alone. Most people overlook them. They don't have the popularity of chickens. They're not as widely discussed in farm business ideas. And they don't dominate social media farming content. But that's exactly why they're powerful. Because in profitable farming, the biggest opportunities are often hidden in plain sight. Guinea fowl are different. They behave differently. They survive differently. And most importantly, they perform differently when it comes to profit. Let's start with the biggest factor that determines success in small farm animal systems. Cost. Because if your costs are high, your profit will always struggle no matter how many animals you raise. Guinea fowl are natural foragers. Unlike chickens that rely heavily on purchase feed, guinea fowl can find a significant portion of their food on their own. They eat insects, seeds, grass, small pests. In a backyard farming setup, or even a simple homestead environment, they actively reduce your feeding expenses. And this changes everything, because feed is the number one expense in most livestock systems. Reduce feed, and you increase profit automatically. This is one of the reasons guinea fowl are becoming a key player in micro-farming and profitable small farm strategies. They allow you to operate with lower input and higher efficiency. And that's the foundation of real farm ROI. But it doesn't stop there, because lowering cost is only one side of the equation. The other side is survival. And this is where guinea fowl quietly outperform many other small farm animals. They are incredibly hardy. In environments where chickens struggle, guinea fowl adapt. They tolerate heat better. They resist common poultry, diseases more effectively, and they require less medical intervention. For a beginner in small-scale farming, this is a massive advantage because every loss in livestock is a direct hit to your income. Every bird that dies is money gone. And when you reduce mortality, you stabilize your homestead income. This is why many experienced farmers who focus on livestock profit begin to shift toward more resilient animals. Not just chickens, not just common options, but animals that survive with minimal input. And guinea fowl fit perfectly into that category. Now here's where things start to get even more interesting, because beyond cost and survival, there's something most people don't realize about guinea fowl: their market value. Guinea fowl meat is considered premium in many regions. It's leaner than chicken, richer in flavor, and often sold at a higher price. At the same time, their eggs are smaller but highly valued. In some markets, guinea fowl eggs are seen as a specialty product. And when you combine higher selling prices with lower production costs, you create a system where small farm profit becomes much more achievable. This is a kind of setup that transforms a simple backyard farming idea into a serious homestead business. But there's still something most people don't understand, and it's one of the biggest reasons guinea fowl remain underutilized. Because while they offer all these advantages, they are not chickens. And treating them like chickens is where many beginners go wrong. But before we get into that, there's another layer to this that you need to understand. Because guinea fowl are not the only option in profitable livestock. There are other animals that also perform well in small farm systems. Animals like Nigerian dwarf goats, known for their milk production and adaptability. Quail farming, which offers rapid egg production in compact spaces. Rabbit farming, with its fast reproduction cycle and efficient meat production. Each of these fits into the larger world of homesteading for profit. Each offers unique advantages. But what makes guinea fowl stand out is how they combine low cost, low maintenance, and strong market value in one system. They simplify farming. And for beginners, simplicity is everything. Because the easier your system is to manage, the more consistent your results become. And consistency is what builds real homestead income over time. But even with all these advantages, there's a critical mistake that can destroy everything. A mistake that most beginners make without even realizing it. And it's the difference between building a profitable small farm and losing money before you ever see results. We'll break that down in the next part, because this is where most people fail. And if you understand it early, you'll already be ahead of 90% of beginners entering this space. The biggest mistake most beginners make with guinea fowl is assuming they behave like chickens. And that single assumption can quietly destroy your entire setup before it even begins to generate real profit. Because guinea fowl are not built for confinement the same way chickens are. They are naturally more independent, more alert, more wild in their behavior. And if you try to force them into a tight, controlled system without understanding this, they will resist it. They will escape. They will stress. And once that happens, your expectations of a smooth farm startup begin to fall apart. This is where many beginners get frustrated, not because guinea fowl don't work, but because they were approached the wrong way from the beginning. Guinea fowl thrive in systems that allow movement. They perform best when they have space to roam, forage, and behave naturally. This is why they fit so perfectly into backyard farming and small-scale farming environments. Not highly restricted setups, not overly controlled systems, but simple, open, functional environments. And once you align with that, everything starts to change. Because instead of fighting the animal, you're working with it. Now here's something most people don't realize. When guinea fowl are allowed to forage properly, they don't just reduce your feed cost. They actively contribute to your farm system. They eat insects. They reduce pests. They help control ticks, grasshoppers, and other small organisms that can damage crops or affect other livestock. In a well-designed homestead business, this becomes a hidden advantage because now your animals are not just consuming resources. They're adding value. This is the kind of thinking that separates basic farming from profitable farming. You're not just raising animals. You're building a system. And guinea fowl fit into that system almost effortlessly. But there's another layer to this that most people overlook. Noise. Guinea fowl are loud. Very loud. And for some people, this becomes a problem. But for others, it becomes an unexpected advantage. Because guinea fowl are extremely alert. They react quickly to movement. They notice changes in their environment. And when something unusual happens, they make noise, a lot of it, in many small farm setups. This acts as a natural alarm system. They can alert you to predators, intruders, or disturbances long before you notice them yourself. So while some see noise as a disadvantage, others see it as free security. And once again, it comes down to how you design your system. Now let's talk about something that directly impacts your homestead income: reproduction. Because no matter how good an animal is, if it doesn't reproduce effectively, your ability to scale becomes limited. Guinea fowl have a unique reproductive behavior. They lay eggs in hidden locations, often in bushes, tall grass, or secluded areas. This can be frustrating if you're expecting them to behave like chickens and lay in nesting boxes. But once you understand this behavior, you can work around it. Some farmers choose to collect eggs and incubate them manually. Others allow natural breeding cycles and simply manage the flock size over time. Either way, the key is understanding that guinea fowl require a slightly different approach. And once you adjust, they become surprisingly efficient at expanding your flock. This is where small farm profit starts to build momentum, because scaling is no longer dependent on constant buying. Your system begins to grow from within. And this is one of the core principles of homesteading for profit. You reduce external input and increase internal production. Now, let's zoom out for a moment, because guinea fowl are just one piece of a larger picture. If your goal is to build a profitable small farm, you need to think beyond a single animal. You need to think in systems. And this is where many successful farmers begin to combine multiple income streams. For example, you might have guinea fowl as your low-cost, low-maintenance poultry system. At the same time, you might introduce rabbit farming for fast meat production. Rabbits reproduce quickly, require relatively small space, and can generate consistent returns in a short period. Then there's quail farming. Quail are compact, efficient, and known for rapid egg production. They fit perfectly into micro-farming setups where space is limited. And then you have animals like Nigerian dwarf goats. Small, adaptable, and valuable for both milk and breeding. Each of these represents a different layer of income, and when combined properly, they create a diversified homestead business. This is how you move from a simple farming side hustle to a structured, income-generating system. But here's the key. You don't start with everything at once. You start with one strong, reliable foundation. And for many beginners, guinea fowl can be that foundation because they require less attention, less feeding, less medical care, and they still produce value. This allows you to stabilize your farm startup before expanding into other areas. Now, let's talk about daily management, because one of the biggest fears people have when entering farming for beginners is time. How much time will this take? Will it consume your entire day? Will it interfere with other responsibilities? With chickens, the answer is often yes. They demand consistency. They require routine. And missing a day can create problems. But guinea fowl offer a different experience. Once established, they become largely self-sufficient. They forage. They explore. They return. Your role becomes less about constant management and more about basic oversight, providing shelter, ensuring safety, monitoring general health. And this is what makes them ideal for a farming side hustle. You don't need to be present every minute. You don't need to constantly intervene. You create the environment, and the system runs. This is a kind of setup that supports long-term homestead income because it's sustainable. It doesn't depend entirely on your time. And in any profitable farming system, time efficiency is just as important as financial efficiency. Now, while all of this sounds powerful, there's still a reality you need to understand. Guinea fowl are not perfect. No livestock is. And ignoring their challenges can lead to disappointment. They can wander. They can be difficult to confine. They may not always return if your environment isn't properly set up, and their nesting habits can make egg collection unpredictable. But these challenges are manageable, and more importantly, they are predictable, which means you can design around them. You can adapt your system. You can set boundaries. You can guide their behavior over time. And once you do, the advantages begin to outweigh the limitations. This is what separates beginners from experienced farmers, not the absence of problems, but the ability to design systems that handle them. And this brings us to one of the most important parts of building a profitable small farm, understanding mistakes before they happen. Because the fastest way to lose money in livestock is to learn everything through failure. And while some mistakes are unavoidable, others can be completely prevented. In the next part, we're going to break down the most common mistakes that destroy farm ROI when raising guinea fowl. Mistakes that quietly reduce your small farm income. Mistakes that make people think the system doesn't work, when in reality it was just mismanaged. And then we're going to bring everything together with a realistic profit breakdown, numbers, expectations, and what you can actually achieve if you do this the right way. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about raising birds. It's about building income, consistent, scalable, and sustainable income. And once you see how this all fits together, you'll understand exactly why guinea fowl are becoming one of the most profitable livestock choices for modern homesteads. Now let's talk about the mistakes, because this is where most beginners lose money. Not because guinea fowl don't work, but because they approach them the wrong way. And if you understand these mistakes early, you instantly increase your chances of building a profitable small farm. The first mistake is overfeeding. It sounds harmless. In fact, it feels like the right thing to do. You want your birds to grow faster. You want them to stay healthy. You want to take care of them. So you feed more and more and more. But with guinea fowl, this kills your profit, because the biggest advantage they have is their ability to forage. The moment you replace that natural behavior with constant feeding, you remove the very thing that makes them efficient. Your feed cost goes up. Your farm ROI drops. And suddenly, your system starts looking just like chicken farming. High input, lower margin. The smarter approach is controlled supplementation. You allow them to forage during the day, and then provide minimal feed support when necessary. This keeps your costs low while still maintaining healthy growth. And that's the balance you're aiming for in profitable farming. The second mistake is poor housing. Many beginners either overbuild or underbuild. Some invest too much in expensive structures, try and create perfect housing. Others do almost nothing, leaving their birds exposed. Both approaches can hurt your homestead income. Guinea fowl don't need luxury, but they do need protection. A simple, secure shelter is enough. A place to roost at night. A space that keeps them safe from predators. Dry, ventilated, functional. That's it. When you keep your housing simple and effective, you protect your birds without destroying your farm startup budget. The third mistake is ignoring predators. This is one of the fastest ways to lose your flock. Because while guinea fowl are alert, they are not invincible. Dogs, snakes, hawks, and other predators can still pose a threat. And if your system doesn't account for this, you'll start losing birds one by one. This is where simple protective measures make a huge difference. Secure night housing, basic fencing if needed, awareness of your environment. Because every bird you lose is not just an animal, it's lost income. And protecting your livestock is protecting your profit. The fourth mistake is expecting chicken-like behavior. This is where frustration begins for many beginners. You expect them to stay close. You expect them to lay eggs in boxes. You expect them to behave predictably. But guinea fowl don't operate that way. They are independent. They explore. They hide nests. They move differently. And once you accept that, you stop fighting the system. You start adapting to it. You design your farm around their nature, instead of forcing them into something they're not. And that's when things begin to work smoothly. The fifth mistake is rushing scale. This is a big one. You see the potential. You see the opportunity for livestock profit, and you try to expand too quickly. You buy more birds. You increase your setup. You invest more money. But if your foundation isn't stable, scaling only multiplies your problems. This is why the smartest approach to small-scale farming is gradual growth. Start small, learn the behavior, understand the system, optimize your setup, and then expand. Because when your foundation is strong, scaling becomes easier and more profitable. Now let's bring everything together. Because at the end of the day, all of this comes down to one thing: numbers, real numbers. Because profitable livestock is not just about theory. It's about what you can actually earn. So let's break this down in a simple, realistic way. Imagine starting with a small flock. Let's say 20 guinea fowl. Your initial farm startup cost includes purchasing the birds and setting up basic shelter. Compared to many other farm animals for profit, this cost is relatively low. Now, your ongoing cost, mainly feed, is reduced because of their foraging ability. This is where you start gaining an advantage over traditional poultry systems. As your birds grow, they begin to produce eggs, meat, potential breeding stock. Each of these represents a different income stream. Eggs can be sold directly. Meat can be sold at premium prices. And live birds can be sold to other beginners entering farming for beginners. Now here's where things get interesting. Because your costs remain low, but your output begins to increase over time. And when you calculate your small farm income at this stage, you start seeing positive margins, not massive overnight profits, but steady growing returns. And that's the reality of a profitable small farm. It's not about quick money. It's about consistent income. Income that builds. Income that scales. Income that becomes predictable. Now compare this to other systems. With chickens, your feed cost is higher. Your mortality risk is higher. Your management time is higher, which means your margin is often tighter. With guinea fowl, your system becomes lighter, more efficient, more flexible. And this is why they are becoming one of the most underrated options in homesteading for profit. Now, does this mean you should ignore other livestock? No, because the strongest homestead business is built on diversity. Guinea fowl can be your foundation, but you can layer other systems on top. Rabbit farming for fast turnover. Quail farming for high egg production in small spaces. Nigerian dwarf goats for milk and breeding. Each adds another stream of homestead income. Each increases your overall farm ROI. And together, they create a resilient system. This is what modern profitable farming looks like. Not just one animal, but a combination of efficient systems working together. And it all starts with making the right first choice. Choosing an animal that reduces risk, reduces cost, and increases your chances of success from the beginning. And for many people, that animal is guinea fowl, because they simplify the process. They reduce the pressure. They allow you to enter small-scale farming without being overwhelmed. And once you gain confidence, you expand, you grow, you build something bigger. Now here's the truth most people won't tell you. Farming is not easy. There will be challenges. There will be learning curves. There will be moments where things don't go as planned. But the difference between those who succeed and those who quit is the system they choose. If your system is too heavy, too expensive, too demanding, you burn out. But if your system is efficient, adaptable, and aligned with your environment, you grow, slowly at first, but steadily. And that steady growth is what creates real homestead money. So if you're thinking about starting, or if you've already started and you're struggling, take a step back, look at your system, ask yourself if it's working for you or against you, because sometimes the biggest upgrade you can make is not working harder. It's choosing smarter. And that's exactly what guinea fowl represent. A smarter entry point into livestock profit. A simpler path into backyard farming. A more efficient way to build small farm income. Now, if you've made it this far, you're already thinking differently. You're not just looking at animals. You're looking at opportunity. And if you're serious about turning that opportunity into real income, then you need the right guidance. Because this is just the beginning. There's so much more to building a profitable small farm. More systems. More strategies. More farm business ideas that actually work in the real world. And that's exactly what this channel is about. So if you want to learn how to build a homestead business, if you want to discover the best farm animals for profit, if you want real practical strategies for farming side hustle income, then subscribe to Herd and Harvest. Because here, we don't just talk about farming. We break down the smartest ways to turn small land into real profit. We show you how to build systems that work, systems that grow, systems that pay. So don't just watch this video and move on. Take action, subscribe, and start building your own profitable farm one smart decision at a time. Because your journey into profitable farming doesn't start with more effort. It starts with the right knowledge. And this is where it begins. Rock it.